Hello mate, and welcome to another exciting video. In this one we are going to look at some basics of how to not render like an arsehole. So it's basically I'm going to do a render. I haven't really got a plan right now. I'm just going to kind of put a scene together and we'll see what comes back from it. So I think the first thing I want to do is just create a ground plane by clicking on this shape up here that looks like three shapes smushed together. I'm going to make this probably about 4 meters square. I don't need any divisions, so I'm just going to leave that on default. And then as you can see, my shape has appeared. And that for now is just going to be something that I'm going to set other objects on, but maybe it will become something further down the line. We will see. So now I'm just going to introduce a couple of characters into this and ignore the annoying prompts that come up where I delete broken content, and then you get the warnings because Daz is still trying to find that broken content annoyingly, but there you go, it is what it is. Okay, so I have got my characters into the scene and I'm just going to apply the clothing to them. I have the clothing also set up as presets just to make life a little bit easier. Okay, so let's just give Jake his hair and outfit. I have got a bit of an idea that I've had while I've been waiting for these characters to load, which has taken an unfeasibly long amount of time just because that's Daz Studio for you. So if I go with, let's just see if this fits there or not. It should be fine. Yeah, that's not what I wanted, but we'll go with this instead. And as if by magic, our hair should appear. Now, you won't notice that I'm in smooth shaded mode, and that is simply so that we don't get any nipples, or bush in the shot, so that I get demonetized. I make little enough from YouTube as it is, considering how many people watch my content. But let's not complain about such trivialities. Sweet. Okay, so that's those bits loaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the bits that I don't want. I'm just going to keep her lashes and hair. Going to make sure that they're actually fitted to her, which they are not, weirdly. Okay, so we'll just grab that. And that, I must have forgotten to save it properly when I saved this last. Okay, so that's that done. And then with him, I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to remove the bits that I don't want. There we go. Cool. So one thing I might do, I have a bit of an idea, is I'm going to create a wall, and I'm going to do that using a primitive. I'm going to create a cube like so. And I'm just going to leave it 1 meter by 1 meter because they're both going to be sitting on it. So all I have to do now is with my cube transforms here, I'm just going to adjust the X scale to make it quite a bit wider. And I'm going to adjust the Z scale to make it quite a bit narrower so that they can just sit on it. And then height is, do you know, I don't actually mind that height. That kind of works for me. So the next thing I want to do is just going to get my characters in some kind of semblance of a pose to match what I'm thinking about. So they're both going to be sitting on a wall facing away from the camera, basically. So there are things that you can get away with when the characters are not looking at the camera, but likewise there are also things that you have to take into account. For instance, you get a much clearer view of the buttocks, which means if they're not sinking into the surface that they're based on perfectly, then it's a lot more obvious. It's a lot easier to spot. So you do kind of have to take that into account when you're doing this, but it's a fairly simple fix to get around it. We just have to find a good pose that actually suits what's happening, because if they're leaning forward or leaning back, then that's not going to work. But you also have to bear in mind that these are two characters that are sitting on a wall together. They're going to be having a conversation, so that they're interacting, even though they're not actually touching. You want it to look realistic, like two people sitting on a wall having a conversation, rather than, I think this one will do, rather than just kind of two people that are sitting on a wall not really interacting in any way. So he's 180 degrees out, so I'm going to change that to that. And then I'm just going to raise it up, and I'm going to have Jake sitting on the left. Let's just move him across. And now we can get close up over here and we can adjust his height. And what I might do is I'm actually quite tempted to put a morph or a deformer there on his buttocks and actually flatten them out so that it actually looks more like what we want to do. So we can experiment with that for a moment. What I could do is hide the cube there, and then I can create a new deformer, which is there. We'll just call it deformer 1. That's fine. So that's on Jake, and now what I can do is I can select the deformer in the... So we've got the base there, and then we've got the field there, and I'm actually going to change the influence from a sphere to a... actually, I might leave it as a sphere and just adjust the scale to make that much, much smaller, because at the moment it's freaking huge. Basic, but what I want is just to affect his buttocks and nothing else, so I might have to adjust the scales a little bit so that the X and Z scale are larger and the Y scale needs to be quite a bit smaller. And then I need to actually move the deformer down so that it's actually affecting the right part of his body. Now I want to really kind of focus on centralizing this so that it's actually affecting both cheeks at the same time. And a bit too much there. That might be okay. Let's see. That might be okay. If we move it. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to leave that where it is for a second. Okay, so after a little bit of quick investigating, it turns out that there is a bit of a mechanical issue with regards to I don't know, something's glitched. So what I'm doing instead is I'm actually going to use a weight map. So I'm just going to paint that onto his seat just like this. And I know it's doing something weird at the moment. That's because I've moved the deformer. So don't panic about that. All I'm going to do is just work on his bum cheeks like that. And probably just extend that a little bit further along there. And then all we have to do is move the deformer. As you can see, currently it's translated that way. So what I actually want to do is just set that back to 0 so that it doesn't adjust that too much. And then we can try adjusting the Y scale, seeing if we can flatten that out a little bit. And it has indeed flattened it, but it's flattened it in the wrong direction. So what I need to do now is actually raise that up a smidge. And what we're looking for is for our buttocks to get flattened nicely. So if we keep reducing that down and then bringing the Y translate up a little bit, that's probably pretty close to where we want it to be. And then we just make sure that our weight map is appropriate. We're not actually going to see him from the front, so it's not the end of the world if it doesn't look perfect, but basically we want to get it close to what we're after, and that is fairly close, I'm thinking, now that I've got the buttocks more or less married up. So that's cool. So now if I bring my cube back in, I can actually now adjust Jake so that he's parked on the wall a little bit more sensibly. And it is a lot of work to go through for such a minor detail, but I'm firmly of the belief if you're going to do this, you might as well do it thoroughly. So yeah, so now I know that this bit's clipping through, but again, we can't see that, but what we can see is the buttocks. So I want those to be kind of right. Cool, so now we're going to go and do something similar with Laura. So we grab her, we'll go back to our smart content and find a sitting pose that we like for her. And obviously, being a female character, props and poses are considerably more abundant on the store. So I have numerous poses to choose from in this case. And again, I just have to find something that kind of suits the purpose. Something like her sitting on a wall. And again, she's not got her back turned to Jake. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be looking at each other, but it kind of has to match look vaguely like what I want it to look like. So there's a number of vendors recently, or a number of artists recently, who've made really, really annoyingly large packs where they have, rather than putting the metadata in their packs properly, they have all of their poses, all of the partials in. So it basically it overruns your smart content to the point where it's very difficult to actually find anything. So that I wish vendors would stop doing that. So if you are a creator, sort it out. Stop doing that crap, because it's really annoying. You want to talk about how to not render like an asshole? Well, yeah, you get my point. Okay, so I think this one might do. This pose could very well be the trick. And let's see how that looks when she's 180 degrees around the other way. Maybe not that much. Let's just bring her around so that she's there. And then we'll bring her up so that she's more or less level with Jake. And then we're going to bring her across. And that kind of, I like that. Okay, so we're going to have to do the same thing with her buttocks as we did with Jake's. Okay, so after some faffing around, we finally got that sorted. Okay, so now we've got our two characters sitting on the wall, and they look like they're interacting after a fashion. Next thing we have to do is fix Laura's hair. As you can see, it's currently poking into her back and not dangling down straight. So let's just select that. And we're going to just make some adjustments there. You can use the blow dials usually to get more or less the effect you want. So that goes one way, which means this one's likely to go that way, which it does. And then we have to find the one that blows it backwards, not that one. That's kind of better. Yeah, that's better. It's not poking into her back anymore. So that's that bit sorted. Next thing I'm going to do is texture the wall. So we're going to select that, and I'm just going to choose. Let's have a look at brick first and see if we've got any decent brick textures that we can apply to the wall. And obviously this time, now that I've got my characters in place and their backs to the wall, I can afford to risk going to texture shaded mode. That will now allow me to see what's happening with the wall, and I don't want it to be any special kind of funky wall. I just want it to be standard. So what I'm going to do is apply the material to it, and then I'm going to change the number of tiles. Now, horizontal tiles definitely needs to be changed. I'm going to see what 5 looks like. Okay, so I think I need to bump this up to, I'm going to say 9, and I also need to change the vertical tiles up to maybe double that. See how that looks. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so next thing I want to do is put some kind of plants here just to give a little bit more detail. So again, I'm just going to look for plant in my smart content, and with any luck, after a few moments, we'll get something. So I'm going to start off with just a standard shrub. That will work. Oh, nope, that's the wrong thing. Make sure you actually select the shrub. And I'm going to put that off to one side on that side of the wall, perhaps. And let's see, I don't want the same thing on both sides. So maybe find something a little bit more sparse looking. Maybe even a potted plant. So let's try this one. That's not too big. We can shrink that down, that's fine. So we'll scale that down. And then I'm going to actually turn off selection on the wall just so that I can't accidentally select it, because it's going to keep getting in the way otherwise. Then we're just going to drag this up, and I'm going to put it maybe there beside Jake, and just make sure that it's not clipping into the wall, which it appears not to be, but I can always just drop it down if that's the case. Happy days. And then I'm going to bring the camera. So I'm going to pull the camera way back. And I'm going to create a camera right here. So I'm going to choose this button here and then choose Apply Active Viewport Transform. So we're going to choose that. Jump into my camera now. And then with the camera option selected, I'm going to change the focal length. And I'm actually going to drop this right down to about 5 centimeters off the ground. And then I'm going to look up like this. And then I know that I can move that shrub, the cedar shrub, I can move that across a little bit more, like so. That works. And then I'm going to add something in the middle, something in between the camera and our characters. So I'm just going to literally throw a random tree in at this point. And then I'm going to bring it towards the camera. And then off to the side. Going to bring it even more towards the camera. Jump into my camera view again and just see what I can see. And as you can see, I've actually clocked it completely out. So if I were to do that, next thing I need to do is actually choose an HDRI in my render settings. So first thing I need to do is actually go into NVIDIA Iray mode so that the render options appear. Give that a moment to have a bit of a think. And then in my environment, I can actually browse for a different HDRI. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to turn off ground, because there's no point. The ground isn't actually in the shot, so we don't need to see that. And I'm going to turn on draw dome. And that should give us a better effect. That's good. And now we can actually rotate the dome to get the lighting where we want. But I don't mind that lighting, to be honest, but we can explore and see if we can get something better. So let's just go around in increments of 90 to start off with. See, that to me looks a little bit better, but I think we can do better. So I'm actually going to go to a 135 this time, which is an increment of 45. That's a little bit better in terms of the lighting on the backs of them, but now we've got trees in the background. So let's go to 180 and see what that gives us. Again, really nice solid lighting from the back, but the trees in the foreground kind of blur everything together. So let's go up to 215. No, let's go to 270. See what we get. And again, that's an improvement on lighting, but at least there's more shadow this time. So let's try going back to, let's go to 75. That wasn't too far before we had a blue sky in the foreground. We'll come back to 135 and see if that gives us our blue sky. No, I think it must have been maybe 90 then. There you go. So I kind of prefer that because it looks like they're looking off into nothing. Now what I need to do is jump back into smooth shaded mode. Come out of my camera, and I'm actually going to select my camera wherever there it is. There it is. Choose my camera, turn on depth of field, and now I need to extend the focal distance quite a bit so that it's actually got them in focus. And that should hopefully put a nice bit of blur on this tree in the front. So again, we'll just jump into NVIDIA Iray preview. And we'll see what we see. Okay, so now you can see that that tree is actually now creating something quite interesting. I'm actually going to bump my camera up by about 5 centimeters. That'll just get rid of any blur that I might be catching from the floor. And now I can play with my f-stop here. Let's just try increasing that quite a bit. Let's maybe try 70. And obviously real cameras don't give you that luxury. But here we can. I feel like maybe we want to go up to about 90. Let's see what happens there. There you go. Gives us a little bit more detail in this tree, but not too much. That looks much better. And I feel like this cedar tree, this cedar shrub here needs to move a bit further out of the way. So I'm actually going to... Let's change the Z translate. Currently it's on -3000. Okay, let's come back into smooth shaded mode. Into perspective mode, and we can just find out what's going on there. And I'm actually going to move it this way a little bit. I just don't want it to be fully in focus because it's distracting from the rest of the scene. So now I've moved it out of our focal range. Or have I? Because I have actually extended the focal range quite a bit now. If I select the camera, you can see that we've got that there. So we should be okay to move it a little bit further away. This way. Jump back into our camera. Let's jump into preview mode and see what happens now. It should be a little bit more blurred out now so that it doesn't look... It's not confusing the eye too much, because it was too much in focus before and it was drawing the eye away from the character slightly. So let's have a think. There we go. It's a little bit more out of focus now. So it's just added a little bit more depth. So we've actually got our middle ground, our foreground, or our background, and then our foreground there. So we've got a nice bit of depth in our picture. And to me, that's a pretty decent render. It's very simple. There's not too much going on. It's, you know, a nice little picture. So hopefully you found that useful, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. But until then, you take damn good care of yourselves, all right? Bye-bye.